You know, gamers and gameritas,
let me tell y'all something.
Throughout the ride of Smash Ultimate, I can confidently say that it was very exciting as we spent years learning things about the base game and its Fighter Pass DLCs. And what's really interesting to look back on are the various fake leaks that happened throughout the development of the game. Where I think Smash 4 would beat Ultimate in overall quantity of how many leaks there actually were, Smash Ultimate had less leaks overall, especially ones that were substantial and memorable that lasted longer than 24 hours, but have quite a bit of quality to them. I mean, you have the Grinch leak, the Kakamala leak, the Vergaben leaks in general, the calendar leak, which was pretty creative, all things considered. We could go over those for sure, but I guess every family has its ugly duckling, am I right? The Springman and Decidueye leak. Definitely a child I would get the adoption papers ready for. Now, during this time when this leak was first being discussed around the community, I had actually made a video on it, talking about my thoughts on it and if I thought it was real or not. And years later, coming back to it, yeah, no one was falling for this one, I'm not gonna lie. In fact, I would go as far to say that out of all the fake leaks we got in Smash Ultimate, this one was definitely the least remarkable and the one that I would probably not give an entire video for if it wasn't for one thing, and that was that this was one of the only substantial leaks released before we properly saw Smash Ultimate for the first time in E3. Considering that this leak isn't even listed on the official wiki page for the list of Smash Ultimate leaks, it made me feel like I should do some proper research as to what exactly the Springman and Decidueye leak, or what I'm actually going to call it as the VirtualTurtle leaks, you'll see why soon enough, and not only discuss the contents of the leak, but also what happened afterwards. Did it ever get disproved? And who's the person that leaked it in the first place? And surprising to say, this unremarkable ass leak actually predicted the future. Kinda. I mean, you'll see why I say that. So first, when exactly did this leak take place, or when was it first exposed? Well, from digging, it seems like the leak took place around early to mid-April of 2018. Specifically, the biggest arc of this leak seemed to last from April 14th to April 19th. Though I'm not gonna lie, I would wager that this leak definitely was first revealed before April 14th on 4chan, where it was initially revealed. It's just that sadly, the original post to the leak is pretty much lost to time. But either way, that's not what's important. This leak was shown to us before the official reveal of Smash Ultimate on E3 of 2018, where we got the dump of a crap ton of information about the game, and was after the initial announcement. Once again, not the E3 announcement, but the trailer that first revealed the Inklings joining Smash Bros. Now, why is this important? At this time, we virtually knew nothing about the game. Nothing on how it looked, nothing on how it played, nothing. The only thing we knew at the time was that the Inkling, Breath of the Wild Link, and Mario, with some speculated Mario Odyssey elements to his character, were going to be present, alongside some other fighters that we could make out in the slew of fighter shadows that we got. We were left in anticipation for months with just our over imaginations to pass the time. I would say that this was definitely the most ballsy time to be a Smash leaker and put out a fake leak to see if you could fool people, especially with how ambitious the VirtualTurtle leaks got. Speaking of that, that's actually a good question as well. Why do I call it the VirtualTurtle leaks instead of the Springman and Decidueye leak? Well, one, that name sucks donkey testicles, and two, because that name would only encapsulate one part of the leak, which is the part that was spread the farthest and was talked about the most among the community. Those being the pictures and video of Springman and Decidueye in a spring stadium stage of some sort. Now, this was mostly because, according to the leak, this is all brand new content and would naturally be the most exciting part to discuss. There was another part to the leak as well, which is a high quality image of Mario and the ice climbers on the Yoshi's Island stage, complete with Cappy on top of Mario's head, just chilling with his boy. And as revealed later, the Inkling was also going to be part of the leak in some way, shape, or form, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So first of all, did people really believe this leak to be true at the time? No, they did not. As I said earlier, compared to the other Ultimate fake leaks that happened, this one was very, very ambitious in terms of what they wanted you to believe, especially with the Springman video. Actually, speaking of Springman, let's talk about the 4 characters that were shown here. So first, Mario and the Ice Climbers. Now, as we know, Mario was already revealed to be an Ultimate in the initial trailer. Man, I know y'all were on the edge of your seat wondering if Mario was going to be in Super Smash Bros. Or not. Real nail-biting stuff. Fortunately, you can rest easy. As for the implementation of Cappy, it makes sense, especially since Link was confirmed to come in the design of Breath of the Wild already. So that, combined with Mario Odyssey having nothing but praises when it first came out, it only made sense for the game to be represented in some way, shape, or form. Now, that's Mario, but then there's the Ice Climbers, characters that were heavily wanted back by the community, as in Smash for 3DS and Wii U, the previous games in the series, they were actually one of the few characters that ended up being cut from the roster. Sakurai spoke on not including the characters on September 16th, 2014. 2014, where he said the reasoning for this change was solely because while the characters can run perfectly fine on the Wii U, the 3DS was a whole separate issue, alongside them not being much of a priority over other fighters because their series is really old. Quote, Sakurai mentioned even though many characters are included, there are some who worry about those who didn't make the cut. He specifically addresses the absence of the ice climbers as well. It seems that they were running on the Wii U version, but due to the required hardware power, the team couldn't make them work in the 3DS game. There wasn't as high of priority given to the series that are unlikely to have another installment at this time. The main issue was the fact that they didn't work on 3DS hardware. This led a lot of people to come to the conclusion that they more than likely would return in the next installment, because while the Switch's power rivals that of my sack of potatoes, it definitely is more powerful than the 3DS. Okay, so that part is covered, but what about Springman and Decidueye though? Well, pretty solid picks overall, but very safe looking background. Now obviously the leak didn't feature Geno, Sora, or any other characters that get mentioned every time you bring up Smash leaks, but I would say an ARMS rep and a new Pokemon rep coming into Smash made sense overall. Let's start with Decidueye. I would say that out of the two, Decidueye was a character that was more on the wayside when it came to this leak, mostly because it makes a lot of sense. Sakurai has mentioned already that when it comes to Pokemon, he always makes sure to leave a slot open for the next popular pick. For example, Greninja was picked in Smash 4 because at the time, Pokemon X and Y were the most recent Pokemon games, so it only made sense to have a rep for the games, with Greninja being the choice Sakurai ultimately went with. This goes back to Decidueye, since during the development of Smash Ultimate, this was when the 7th generation was being created. So Sakurai once again left a slot open for a new Pokemon, and Decidueye being the choice Sakurai goes with makes sense, since it is one of the starters you get to begin with. And the starters are obviously one of the safest choices to represent an entire Pokemon region. Now obviously, that was not the choice Sakurai went for, and I know you're about to aggressively type out your paragraphs, but y'all, hold up.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
We'll get to that later. Listen to some lo-fi hip-hop to calm your nerves while I talk about
The Bouncer, Springman.
ARMS was a franchise that a lot of people speculated about being in Smash, for pretty good reasons. One of them being that the game at the time was one of Nintendo's newest franchises added to the Nintendo Switch lineup, and was also one of the games that was highlighted in the very first Nintendo Switch Direct. Now, this is just from what I've seen, but I think that the interest in people saying that ARMS was going to be in Smash was more on a logical front rather than people actually wanting the character in Smash Bros. It just made sense, and the reaction to the leak having Springman in it was something that kind of supports this. Now, there was technically no definitive main character in ARMS, but Springman was kind of like the standard fighter, and by proxy would mean that he would be a pretty good representative in Smash Bros. Me personally, he's alright. Though man, I would really love it if another representative got in instead of Springman, because he's so bland. Wait! Okay? Hold, I'll get to it. So overall, the characters were pretty safe, I would say. Not anything outrageous or outside the box that would make you really think about the character's inclusion. All 4 fighters are characters that at the time were talked about being a complete possibility for the most part. With that being said though, let's go over some positives about the leak first, then the negatives about it. Starting with the positives. Nah, but seriously, there are positives. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people that argued about this leak, so I scrolled through any threads or discussions on any discussion site, whether that be from Twitter or GameFAQs, to get as many arguments for and against the leak as possible. Do not tell me I don't do thorough research for you guys, even though I definitely did cover them all, but regardless, shut up. Anyways, let's get into it. How are the community feeling about the leak when it first came out exactly? And what were the pros and cons? Going through different Smash boards, I've compiled a list of reasons that people thought we should at least give the leak some credit, but also some rebuttals to said arguments to make things flow better. For starters, there was this feeling that was brewing which a lot of gamers know all too well in many facets of their life. Desperation. Because we were getting so little information about Ultimate at the time, people were literally licking sand for any sort of Smash Bros nutrients to be found. And because of the lack of info given to us, it wouldn't give us any substantial Smash Bros leaks. And thus, the VirtualTurtle leaks was one of the first ballsy ones to feature things like pictures and a full-on video. So as a community, we kind of just discarded the very obvious things wrong with it and entertained it for the sake of conversation. It also reignited some of the discussion, as the only thing people were talking about otherwise is if this version of Link was the Breath of the Wild edition or not. Yeah, we were really scraping the bottom of the barrel for things, guys. Jeez Louise. To excuse the very questionable quality, there were some that said that this actually could have been an early alpha build that was played a long time ago, or it was beta footage of the game for the sake of testing things. The problem with this take though, and detractors pointed this this out was that in the trailer, the game was set to come out in 2018, the same year when that exact trailer came out. So the argument was that the game should have been nearing completion at this point, or at the very least out of the beta phase, leaving that point kind of mute. Now you could argue that the footage seen was from a while ago, but in that case, why not show newer footage if it was so accessible? On top of that, I saw a comment that also retorted against this point, saying that when people get a hold of the game to do things like testing, it's apparently from localization, which only happens late in development. So there will be no reason for Springman to be animated that roughly when it's late in the game's development cycle. And while we talk about the cons of the leak, let's talk about Decidueye. Now, between Decidueye and Springman, he was definitely the lesser of the two evils, but there were still a lot of people that had some problems with Decidueye, with one of the two arguments I found being that the model looked like it came from Pokken, a 3D fighting game featuring characters from the Pokemon franchise. In the Switch edition of Pokken, Decidueye was featured as one of the newest characters, so it wasn't ridiculous to think that the model in this video was the one from Pokken and was just imported for the sake of convenience. By extension, you could also make the explanation that the model could have also come from the Pokemon Sun and Moon games on the 3DS and was just upscaled for the sake of the leak. There was another decent point by the detractors, specifically that Decidueye's idle animation wouldn't be looking to the side as he was in the video that was posted, due to Sakurai's philosophy on characters that he established in Smash 4 in a pick of the day, where he essentially said that when he creates a fighter, he wants to be able to show their best features. And looking at Decidueye in action, it doesn't seem to follow this philosophy the best. Now, these were valid arguments and something rooted in logic for the most part, until an absolute legend came in and debunked that theory. This person on Smashboards goes by the name of Senseless Break, who noted a lot of different arguments against the cons that are pointed out in the video, specifically regarding the characters. He brought up a very good point, saying, quote, "As far as Decidueye goes, it is completely original." They then post this picture, which is a side-by-side comparison of all the different versions of Decidueye that people thought the model was from. And as you can see, there is a noticeable difference between the different models. Senseless goes into a bit more specific, saying the following: "The X-shaped crest on the leak wraps much further than the one from Pokken, and even touches the spot on his wings. In fact, the spot on the wings are placed differently. The green feathers on the Pokken model are much more pointy and more rounded on the leaked Decidueye. And while it's hard to see, the face on the icon on the left is different from Pokken, mainly in the eyes. Also, the color palette matches Sun and Moon more and is more smooth textures instead of ruffles in the feathers." End quote. With this analysis, it seems more likely that the model in the leak was made from scratch, with the already existing models from the other games being used as more of a reference. Other people would add on to this, saying that the model for Decidueye didn't seem to be taken from Ultra Sun in the animation department when looking at the video. And now, speaking of, since we already tackled Decidueye pretty thoroughly, let's cover the more interesting character of the two, Springman. Now, Springman is a whole other can of worms, because now we're dealing with a moving character who showed off a jump and a back aerial. The community had a lot to say about this, and in retrospect, the person that made this has some serious balls to move his character in the video. Now, looking at some of the comments, people were very unimpressed with the character as a whole, with the common argument being that his jump is way too high to be believable, and that his idle animation doesn't look good either and is very rough around the edges, and that goes double for the extremely stiff back air. Bro looks like me trying to do yoga. When you look at references for Smash 4, Sakurai and the team made sure for each character to move very fluidly, making them feel a lot more smooth and buttery when you play them. Unless it's a character like Mr. Game Watch, as it's most likely a stylistic choice and done on purpose because the characters are more retro. Arms is not retro at all. So the stiff movements just don't feel like it's an upgrade of Smash 4 whatsoever. Some even said that his legs look too small or don't exactly look right, but that's just how the Arms fighters were built, considering the name of the game is Arms and not Legs. There were also people saying that Springman was based on another fighter, being mostly based on Little Mac for obvious reasons. They're both allergic to paprika. Now, Senseless Break's post would also cover Springman's character and debunk a lot of these points by saying, quote, "Springman's animations are completely original and do not match any other character. Not Little Mac, not Ryu, all original. His posture matches that from Arms. His animations are also appropriately springy. His coils move with him, his textures are shinier and has a different hue than the Arms that fit Smash. This is not a direct rip or a costume hack. And yeah, looking at it, Springman does have completely original animations that do fit the Arms game's brand, since in that game, characters are constantly moving, similar to what Springman is doing in the video. Senseless also shows an image comparing the Springman in the leak to the Springman in ARMS, and as they said, the coils do indeed match the ARMS aesthetic. This shows that everything about Springman, from the model itself to even the movement, while not very fitting to how Sakurai created previous characters, is made from the ground up, which is very impressive in its own right, and ultimately added a lot more merit to the leak, at least not falling by the wayside. With that being said, I think it's pretty safe to say that both Springman and Decidueye had a lot of work done to them, at least more than the average leak. The question is, does this also apply to the stage and video as well? Well, for the video, there were a couple red flags that rose up when people were watching it, such as why the person in the leak couldn't do things like exit out the game, or maybe having Springman fight against Decidueye to showcase more of his moveset if he was already showing this much already. Or why not show more than just a Spring Stadium stage, like the general stage selection or the character select screen? To mix it up a little off the cons, another thing that people argued for the leak being real is that if you look at the screen of the video, you see that GameCube buttons are on the pause screen, despite the fact that the Switch had previously registered the GameCube controller as a Pro controller, which adds more validation to this not just being a cheap and lazy work job, but something that if it was fake, had a lot of time put into it. The more unique stuff that's present in your leak, the more convincing it is for people to believe that it's the real deal. And actually, there were people who had issues with the Spring Stadium stage as well, where detractors said things like the stage was very small, especially when comparing it to Decidueye and Springman. Also, there were things like the crowd in the back that didn't look too good. And yeah, looking at the stage again, seriously, why is the stage so small? Honestly, like, what are you even supposed to do here? Like, how are you supposed to fight? It looks like they're gonna have a picnic, not a fight. Like, damn.
Fraggle, fraggle! Ah! Somebody help me!
Now, with the stage being like this, there was a lot of people who believed that this leak was a Smash 4 or Brawl mod that was just modified. In all fairness though, when the original trailer announcing Smash Ultimate was shown, a lot of people were on that same line of thought, with them saying that this mysterious new Smash game was just a revamped Smash 4, kinda similar to games that were ported to the Switch like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now, we've kind of already shown that the characters are not ripped straight from the mod or anything, but Senseless Break also addressed the stage being ripped from ARMS, saying that, quote, even the stage took time to animate the background and edit the stage so it has a proper void and more shaped like a Smash arena. So the things I'm certain after analyzing these are not direct rips and were not slapped together and called a day. If fake, the person put a lot of time and detail into it. The attention to detail is strong. This is not made by the skills of an amateur modder. It seems more like an official project. They then put a picture also comparing the Spring Stadium in the leak to the official Spring Stadium in ARMS. And as I said about the characters, it seemed like whoever made it didn't take a rip of the stage, but more so used it as a close reference to create the product that's shown in the leak. Senseless Break's post was something that wasn't just to be ignored, as there were other people who agreed with their post. Quote, based on Senseless Break's analysis through the footage and screenshot of Springman be up for debate. Like I said, an animation made to mimic Smash gameplay is very much a possibility. I haven't seen anything where the models and animations were made from the ground up and added. So there's definitely a good argument for this part of the leak to at least be fully original. But it seemed that the other image shared would have a lot more glaring issues with it that people were not shy to point out. And of course, I mean the Mario and Ice Climbers portion of the leak. With Mario, a lot of people found it odd that Cappy seemed constantly present, which would throw people off because in Super Mario Odyssey, Cappy did not work like that and would instead be hidden until Mario threw him out, which he's clearly not doing in the image. You would think that's a nitpick, but if you guys know anything about Smash Bros, you would know that attention to detail is a huge thing in the series that's praised. So missing a detail like that definitely would put people off on believing it. The other thing is that when you compare the art style of Mario and compare it to the art style of the Ice Climbers, they don't really match and are quite jarring to say the least. And speaking of the Ice Climbers, they were going through whole other issues. And I'm not talking about divorce.
Oh, nigga, don't hate me because I'm beautiful, nigga. Maybe you got rid of that old yee ass haircut.
To start with the positive about them though, people were pointing out how good the texturing on the Ice Climbers looked, which I can definitely say was a big strength of this part of the leak in general. Other people had a lot of issues with the two, saying that their model were the biggest suspect of this photo being part of a Brawl mod, and that they were incorrectly scaled and looked too small on Yoshi's Island. Little to say, this image was kind of picked apart and kind of dismissed overall, which is why I think the Springman and Decidueye portion of the leak got a lot more attention. Someone even decided to upload the video on YouTube a day later to see if Nintendo would take it down or not. And as you can see, the mission failed. Honestly, you would think people would just do this a lot more, because they would definitely take it down regardless of what a leak would show. Soon after this leak would be uploaded, it would not only get the attention by the general community, but also content creators who would go to make videos on it. Artsi Omni would be one of those people, considering he was responsible for making a Rayman leak that would fool the entire community as well. A story for another time. Just know that his opinion on the leak would be a very credible one compared to a lot of other people, which people would echo that sentiment as they wanted him to cover it on his Leak Buster series, a series on his channel that would go through and pick apart various Smash leaks to see if they had weight or not. On April 15th, 2018, Omni would upload a video called Springman plus Decidueye Smash 5 Leak In-Depth Analysis Leak Buster, where he would do a deep dive into the leak to see if it had any merit to it. Yesterday, it was brought to my attention that an alleged leak emerged on 4chan suggesting that Springman, Decidueye, and the Ice Climbers are coming to Smash on Switch. But is it real? Now, Artsi Omni goes on a full breakdown and brings up points that the average Smash gamer wouldn't notice, ones that we'll definitely go into. He first goes into the leak talking about the Ice Climbers and Mario portion of the leak, and mentions how the Ice Climbers seem like they could have come from a Brawl mod, similar to a lot of people's sentiments on the matter. And also similar to what people were saying, he also mentioned the argument of Cappy being on Mario's head, and that he shouldn't always be on as it's not accurate to Super Mario Odyssey.
Notice he has Cappy on his head, which is interesting. I think it's weird that people expect Cappy to be on Mario's hat at all times. Now, of course, we all want Cappy to be part of Mario's moveset because that's great representation for a very great game, which is, of course, Mario Odyssey. There's no reason for Cappy to always be on Mario's hat. And when we look at the teaser trailer, we do notice that there is no Cappy on Mario's hat, and some people have taken that to mean that Cappy won't be in the game, but Cappy only shows up when Mario throws his hat or when Mario's idling, at least in Mario Odyssey.
Now, these were things that were already mentioned, but one thing that Omni brought to the table was the particle effect used in the picture, where he mentioned that the effect was a red flag because of how identical they look despite it being at the angle that it's at.
Another big thing that I think should be pointed out is that this particle effect here, presumably from when the character jumps, it's identical in both of these instances, which should be sort of concerning because that would imply that both characters jumped at the exact same time so that the particle animation is in the exact same frames.
He even compares it to Smash 4's landing particle effect, where that one has more 3D elements to it compared to this one.
Now, this effect in Super Smash Bros. For Wii U is comprised of not just a billboarded sprite, but also a 3D radial plane, this sort of donut-shaped flat plane that actually creates a 3D effect. And you can see that when I change the camera angle here, you'll notice that this particular part of it is definitely 3D.
While on the subject, it wasn't pointed out in Omni's video, but someone in the comments mentioned that the jump effect that was put into the picture actually wasn't in the actual video when Springman did his jumping animation, which is quite the oversight on whoever made the leaks part. Getting back to the video though, similarly to what Senseless Break said in their post, Omni mentions how he didn't believe that this leak was from a mod and said the reason for him believing this was because of the shadows, something that people hadn't really mentioned yet. More specifically, he said that the shadows were soft on the edges, which is completely different from other AAA Switch games like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Splatoon. He believed that this was very uncharacteristic of a decision like this, since shadows are something that's not important enough to focus on, and that graphically it's very far from a game that's supposed to be for a console like the Nintendo Switch. Because of that, Omni suggests that this was actually pre-rendered footage that's displayed here, instead of this being real-time footage, in which he would then further prove going into the video, pointing out that this would have to be off a completely different engine, as the Switch wouldn't have the ability to do what Springman's shadow did in the leak.
And again, almost forgot to mention, pay attention to Springman's shadow when he jumps. The shadow becomes so diffused because of the distance between Springman and the ground that it almost fades away entirely. And this is not something that you see in any Switch game that I can think of. And frankly, it's not something that you see in any Smash game that we've had in the past either. So this means that it's definitely not a mod, and it's probably not even running in real time unless it's running a completely different engine that, I don't know, is running on a much more powerful PC or something like that. But this is not something that we can expect on Switch hardware.
Omni also goes into the Springman picture and mentions something that I'm shocked took me this long to bring up, and that was the fact that the director of ARMS, Kosuke Ibuki, mentioned in an interview when Smash Ultimate was first announced if an ARMS character was going to join the roster.
ARMS is a new IP that a lot of people think deserves to be in Super Smash Bros. And of course, Springman would be a great contender to represent that franchise. However, we already know that the director of that game, Mr. Ibuki, has expressed that it might be too soon for an ARMS character to be in Super Smash Bros. So obviously that creates a bit of doubt as to whether or not this is actually something that will happen.
Another thing I'd say is that ARMS is so young, it's only a year old, that maybe it's too early to think about that. But I think it's absolutely fantastic that there are people out there talking about ARMS in that way. This would make it very unlikely that the franchise was up for consideration at all, which would make the leak lose a little more of its believability. Omni would then go into the pictures, claiming that the assets were taken straight out of ARMS, and that the leaker either ripped the models from ARMS completely, or that they used it as a reference to create Springman's model, alongside also mentioning how Springman's model having too high of a resolution was a huge red flag, and said that his model is too smooth looking, meaning that there were a lot of polygons used to create it.
Springman model isn't exactly the same from the one in ARMS, although it is very, very similar. The problem is it's a lot more high resolution. That's to say that there's a lot more polygons. Now, the fact that this is so high resolution should be a red flag in and of itself, because typically Smash models don't have that many polygons. There's a lot of action happening in a game like Smash, so you can't afford to have that many polygons. And things like Mario Kart, ARMS, Mario Odyssey, the character models aren't that smooth looking, and this looks very smooth.
So basically, all this to say, the Switch is ass. Next, Omni criticized the UI that was presented, saying that the font used is very close together, and the outlines around said text was very thin, to the point where when you give it a second look, the thin outlines that bleed into each other is very apparent and doesn't really look good. There were also minor things like the weird logo for the D-pad, and that the use of the GameCube controller interface was weird, since this would most likely be used for testing purposes.
Also interesting that they chose to use the GameCube controller interface. Of course, we all want the GameCube controller to be in the game, but I feel like development wouldn't be done using a GameCube controller just because that would be a little bit more inconvenient, but that's all speculation on my part. It's not really any sort of reason to doubt that they would use a GameCube controller.
But the real meat and potatoes come from the video itself. One really good point that Omni mentioned for the leaked video was that the video was being shot off screen, when the pictures that were shared were in-game footage or direct feed footage. This is significant because it really begs the question, why not just shoot the video in-game as well?
Now, of course, this video was shot off screen, which is very common for fake leaks, and I think that doesn't really make any sense when they have direct feed screenshots. They obviously, if they're developers, then they would have the ability to create direct feed footage, but this person has elected to take off-screen footage, and I think the reason that you would do that if you're trying to make this fake leak would be to make it impossible to scrutinize the details, like the character models, the animations. It makes it a lot harder to see whether or not things line up with what we expect.
Another thing mentioned was that Springman doesn't move laterally, and then goes on to criticize the minimal movement in the video, saying that a lot of fake leakers do that to try and hide something, which makes a lot of sense and goes nicely with the questions people had on why didn't the leaker just go back and show off the stage selection screen or something. Omni also comments on the incredibly stiff animations on Springman, and similar to what Senseless Break said, also says that Decidueye's model is not from Pokken, and speculates that it's more modified from the Decidueye model from Pokemon Sun and Moon. He lastly talks about the Spring Stadium stage, claiming that it was heavily modified from the original game, and suggested that the assets of Spring Stadium were taken and put into the stage since it would be less work instead of creating all new ones. Omni ends the video by concluding that the leak is obviously fake due to some of the smaller details that he saw that a lot of people like you and I would never be able to see. The comment section had a lot of support for the leak being fake, alongside some other blemishes that people made sure to point out as well. From the perspective of someone that created a fake leak before being shared, it seemed that overall, this leak was deemed fake in the public eye, with people only being fooled for a maximum of a couple hours. It seemed that just as quickly as the leak was introduced to us, it got debunked as fake, with everyone who was invested moving on after a couple days. That is, until a plot twist occurred, and the leaker decided to reveal themselves. A lot about the leaks were pretty much criticized by every angle, to former leakers who had a lot of credibility behind them. But one thing wasn't answered just yet. Who exactly leaked this? All things considered, people were actually very impressed by its quality, especially with it being shown that there was actually a surprising amount of effort that went into it. So who? Who is the mastermind behind this leak that absolutely no one fell for? Well, gamers and gameritas, on April 19th, 2018, that question will be answered by a video that came out called Behind the Scenes of the Springman and Decidueye Smash 5 Leaks by a lad named VirtualTurtle. And yes, this is why I wanted to call it the VirtualTurtle Leaks instead of the Springman and Decidueye leak, since it has more content than just Springman and Decidueye, so I figured naming it by the leaker's name would make more sense. At the time that the leak was created, VirtualTurtle, or Noah Mesh, was a freshman freshman 3D digital design student who, quote, used this as both a learning experience and to have some friendly competition with my peers in the program. His earliest works in terms of projects that he worked on was back in June 11, 2014, where he would create plugins for a Minecraft software called Bucket, which describes itself as a free open source software that provides the means to extend the popular Minecraft multiplayer server. Soon after that, he then uploaded one of his previous videos where he and his brother created an automatic shiny finder in Pokemon X and Y using spare Legos, 2 Minecraft servos, a photocell, and a microcontroller. Little to say, this man was quite the handyman, and doing this with the materials he had would dictate that he had been interested in things like modifying games as far back as 2014. And after looking at his older videos, I can definitely say that, as Senseless Break hinted at in his post, this dude was extremely talented, even when he was in high school. He would upload videos of him doing other insane projects, like creating an automatic shiny hunter for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire a year later, creating controller support where he could play the 3DS game with a GameCube controller, speed drawing, and using programs like Maya and Blender to create various 3D models. His first experience with working with Smash Bros is him creating the self-proclaimed first Super Smash Bros for Wii U TAS. And if you don't know what a TAS is, it's short for Tool Assisted Super Play. He would do this with a hacked Wiimote using his setup to make this possible. Afterwards, he would go a step further and began dabbling in creating mods for Smash 4, including working on an extremely impressive Smash 4 Snake mod off the Captain Falcon model, with him even adding a moveset completely unique to the fighter, to even rigging and importing Gallium in Smash 4 as a tutorial for getting their models in said Smash title. After doing some admittedly amazing projects, like a crawling hand project made in Blender, and even a remake concept video for the 4th generation of Pokemon called Pokemon Ethereal Pearl, VirtualTurtle's next project was indeed the Springman Decidueye leak, which brings us back to this video right here. So now that you know how talented this dude is and the projects that he's worked on previously, let's now visit the leak that fooled absolutely no one. So in the video, Turtle goes into different segments and talks about different aspects of his leak, like characters and stages separately. So we'll cover it the same way to see what the community got right and what they got wrong. Now remember how in the leak there was a group of people that thought the leak must have been made in a different fashion other than a Brawl or Smash 4 mod, which was said by both Senseless Break and Artsi Omni? Well, it turns out that their hunch was completely right, and the leak turned out not to be made from a mod at all.
Before I get started though, there's a few things that I'd like to clear up. So first off, everything was actually pre-rendered in 3D software. Nothing was modded in. I actually thought about modding it in or making some sort of real-time game scene, but that was way too many hoops to jump through, so I just stuck with Blender.
The whole thing was made completely in Blender, a program that he was already familiar with, allowing him to do the very impressive movements and idle animations for the characters. Going into Springman, he said that he ripped the model straight from the game, though the model didn't come with the actual arms, so he had to recreate the arms completely from scratch, as he shows in the video.
So I had to go through and recreate the entire glove model, give it textures, make it look nice, make it look like he was in the game. I had to go through like 3 different revisions, making it look exactly correct to the game, because I don't actually have arms, I only have reference images from arms.
This was pointed out in the Artsi Omni video, where someone told him the exact same thing in a post and was right on the money. Next, Turtle talked about Decidueye, in which he explains that the model was not ripped by Sun and Moon like Omni had predicted, but instead was ripped from Pokken. He then went in and heavily modified various aspects of Decidueye, like his feathers and textures, to give a nice middle ground of the Sun and Moon model and the Pokken model, which is honestly pretty smart, if I say so myself. The video and animation for the characters and stage was made through a function in Blender called nonlinear animation, or NLA for short. It's often used to make broad, significant changes to a scene's animation with relative ease. It can also repurpose, chain together a sequence of motions, and layered actions, which make it easier to organize and version control your animation.
So with Springman, I did a bunch of them, but with Decidueye, I only had to make an idle, and then like an idle 2, which would just be like him moving his wings or whatever, just to make it slightly more convincing.
Now next was a section involving Mario and the Ice Climbers fighting on Yoshi's Island. Mario's model was taken from Super Mario Odyssey and was modified to fit the Smash Bros aesthetic when necessary, making him a hybrid of the two. The Ice Climbers, similar to what a lot of people were saying, were just a slightly modified version of the Brawl models, where it was just a simple smoothing of textures. This one is definitely one of the weakest ones he did, as he admits in the video.
The Ice Climbers I am slightly ashamed of, because I know I didn't do enough work to change them, but I wasn't sure how to change them and in what ways, because we haven't seen them since Brawl, and I just honestly didn't know how a update of aesthetic would look.
You know, in retrospect, I don't know why he made it so hard for himself. He could have just chosen a safe character that was already in Smash 4 that was just as likely to appear in the game. But the lad had buns of steel, I'll tell you that much. Conveniently, one of the safer fighters to choose that he actually ended up considering was Splatoon's very own Inkling, considering that we already saw them in the initial announcement trailer.
Now, I had actually planned on doing Inkling. I ripped him from my copy of Splatoon, and I put him into Blender, and I redid all the shaders, made him look like a higher quality version, remodeled the face, did a bunch of stuff.
The reason why Turtle ended up not using him for the leak was that he felt that the model used wasn't matching the aesthetics, even with the modifications that he did. That said, it still probably would have been more believable to use that instead of the smooth climbers over there. Oh, so buttery smooth.
Smooth like butter.
No way.
There were some other characters like Breath of the Wild Link that Turtle considered putting in the leak as well. Ultimately, he didn't want to bite off more than he could chew, as he was already doing so much anyway. He then moves on to the stages, starting with the Yoshi's Island stage, where he says it was both a screen cap and a rip from Brawl that he lit up and textured. Alongside this, Turtle also showed off a stage that he was originally gonna put in the leak, that being a stage based on Kirby Air Ride's City Trial, a mode that partially inspired one of the other modes in Smash 3DS, Smash Run. And since we know how much Sakurai loves his Kirby, it would be a pretty solid idea to use that as a potential new stage to trick people. The idea ended up not coming to fruition because it also didn't fit the aesthetics that Turtle was going for, and may have made the characters that he created even less believable.
And I got pretty far down in the pipeline, and then I decided against using it, because it kind of really didn't fit any of the characters' aesthetics. I didn't have Kirby or any Kirby characters, so it kind of didn't really make sense to have a stage from this weirdly obscure old Kirby game in the leak, because it just wasn't, I guess, relevant enough.
Now the real impressive stuff came in with the final stage that Turtle talked about, Spring Stadium. At the time when he created the Spring Stadium stage, there was no ripoff or anything of the stage itself, and the only way he could get them was from the people that had the game ISO files and the decryptors. Because of that, besides the references he used to make sure the proportions were as accurate as possible, Spring Stadium was entirely made from scratch.
But the stages themselves are not public, and the only ones who can get to them are the ones who have like the actual game ISO files and the decryptors. I don't have ARMS, and I don't know where some decryptor is, so I had to remake the entire stage from scratch using only reference images from the game.
If this isn't impressive beyond belief and shows the talent of this dude, I don't know what will. The main platform was shrunken so the characters realistically have a place to die, though people did still pick up on the logistics of how the stage worked. Regardless, this was a very close match in terms of Spring Stadium itself. The animations and models of the crowd were also completely made from scratch, in which Turtle took a high definition photo of the ARMS fans from the actual games and made the animation in After Effects.
Luckily there was a high definition photo posted of like each of the supporters, so I went in and photoshopped them and then made their arms move and then put it into After Effects and then rendered it out and then put those characters randomly inside of Blender. The process took quite a while and I don't think it was worth it, but I don't know.
Overall, from front to back, this stage in itself is definitely the highlight of Turtle's work, and once again shows his talents of using various programs to create these models and images. He then goes over the UI a bit and saying that he wasn't a 2D artist, with the result being a less than stellar UI that was similar to Smash 4's. And since in previous Smash Bros games, the UI always has a significant change, it would be a telltale sign by the community that there was something fishy about it. The bottom character sprites with the percentage behind it was made from scratch, but took some heavy inspiration off how Smash 4's UI looked. Finally, there was the video, which was shot in the 3D lab of his university. There were people that were saying that the GameCube controller in the video wasn't plugged into the Switch itself, in which Turtle debunks the claim by saying the controller was actually plugged into the back of the console. Also, according to Turtle, the video was originally in 1080p and 60 FPS, as a video being a potato quality is usually another indicator that a Smash Bros leak was completely fake.
It was actually shot in the 3D lab of my university, and it originally was like 1080p 60 frames per second and it had audio and everything, but 4chan/V only allows you to upload 3 megabyte WebMs and the audio is disabled, and so that heavily discredited against it, and I didn't like it, but I wasn't sure, you know, how can I upload a video somewhere else and then link it to wherever, so I just stuck with it, compressed the file, so
90% of the time, leakers don't reveal that it was them who created a leak, let alone create an entire video of how they made it. So it was really cool of Turtle to create an official breakdown of how he made it in the first place. The video would go on to getting over 100,000 views, being on the upper end of Turtle's most popular videos on his channel, and got the attention of some pretty notable figures, including Artsi Omni himself, who would then go ahead and update the title of his video, confirming that it was fake, and put Turtle's video in his description. From there, the smoke settled and the community went their separate ways, still waiting for any official news on the mysterious new Smash Brothers game. In this period, no other leak stuck like how this one stuck, even if it was for a short amount of time. While no one really fell for the leak being real, being more skeptical and open to it being real at best, this was easily one of the most impressive leaks made throughout the rest of Smash Ultimate's lifespan, and really showed the talent of Virtual Turtle. Speaking of, that's actually a good question. What exactly happened after this leak was proved fake? Did the leak get anything right in terms of its content? And most importantly, what's Virtual Turtle been doing after his Smash leaking escapades? Well, after the release of his video, the overall reaction from the community, similar to when Artsi Omni did a similar stunt with his Rayman leak, was pretty positive. There were of course a lot of people who were not shocked whatsoever that this turned out to be fake. I mean, even my stupid ass didn't fall for it at the time.
My guess is that the leak is going to get a fake from me, and that it's just, I think it's boxing ring because
though there were people that realized the hard work that went into it making everything, and praised Turtle for putting so much effort into making a solid Smash leak. This was good stuff. Even if Springman's animation weren't even close to the quality they'd need to pull it off, that's a lot of work right there. Making the hand, making the stage, it's a real good effort. You should use this in the future as an example of something you've done. Awesome to release this stuff too. They easily could have used a mod or just taken pictures of their finished Blender project, but they had the balls to animate it and to make a few new models, making a good at best fake leak. It's a great start to all the hype leaks, even if they're fake, that'll pop up, showing how it's sorta done. With every Smash game comes a leak/leaker who proves himself as an incredible mind to follow. You and Omni are god tier leakers with how much effort you put into these projects, all just to fool someone into believing a character is coming to Smash. Huge props to you. Can't wait to see more of anything you make. On April 17th, 2018, there were screenshots that went around of Min Min and Detective Pikachu, where people assumed that this was made by Turtle, with the biggest identity being the UI being eerily similar to the Springman and Decidueye video. This was actually confirmed to not be the case, because in the behind the scenes video, Turtle would address this, saying that it wasn't him who made it, but his UI was used by whoever made the leaks.
Secondly, the second round of images with Min Min and Detective Pikachu posted today on the 17th were not created by me, but somebody just modded them in and used my pause UI.
And yes, I know I said we're talking about things that happened after the Turtle leaks, but we're covering something that happened before, but listen! Listen! It's my video and this fits the context, so go suck nuts! Fast forward to E3 2018, where Nintendo would primarily focus on presenting the brand new Smash game with the iconic Everyone Is Here trailer announcing the grand return of the Ice Climbers, and Cappy being used in Mario's moveset as well. Okay, that was a slight exaggeration. It's used in one of his taunts, but we'll still give it to him. While Turtle was off with how Smash Ultimate would look, he did make the right prediction of the Ice Climbers' inclusion, Cappy, and the Yoshi's Island stage as well. Not the most remarkable prediction in the world, but he did end up being right in the end. Come November 1st, 2018, and another prediction of Turtles would come true. Technically, he had the Gen 7 Pokemon part of the leak correct, just got the specific Pokemon wrong, as Incineroar would end up being that representative, and Decidueye would unfortunately go by the wayside. In retrospect though, it is interesting to know that Decidueye was actually confirmed in a Sakurai Famitsu article to be heavily considered as a potential part of the roster to Smash Ultimate, even getting to the final two, but was obviously outshone, with it mostly being that Sakurai saw Incineroar as the more interesting fighter in terms of moveset and design. In that same direct, it would also be revealed that Springman, the other prominent character in the leak, was confirmed to be an assist trophy, which, as the average Smash fan would know, is a dream crusher that the character will never be in the game in a playable format. This was also addressed by Sakurai via Famitsu article, with him saying that the reason an ARMS representative wouldn't work is because the project plan for Smash Ultimate was done way before the inception of ARMS, which makes sense considering that Sakurai had been working on the plan since, at the very least, around 2015 when the final DLC characters for Smash 4 was being worked on. But just when it seemed bleak for all the ARMS fans, in a Nintendo Direct Mini, it would be revealed that the first DLC character for Fighter Pass 2 would be a representative from ARMS. Exciting news for pretty much not a lot of people, not a lot at all. The excitement for the fighter would more be that mystery aspect as to who the character coming would be. Would it be the obvious choice of Springman or Ribbon Girl? Or would they go left field and choose a characters like Twintel or Ninjara, the characters that had a decently large fan base?
¿Por qué no los dos?
That's what I'm saying! Sakurai would reveal the $1 million question on June 22nd, 2020, where it was revealed that it would be Min Min, a very welcome addition to the roster, reaching a nice middle ground of a character with a huge fan base and a character that people would say is a good representative for ARMS and its mechanics. Well, I mean, they all would, but you see my point. This would lead to the most well-known part of Turtle's leak being both completely wrong, but completely right at the same time. We did get both a Gen 7 Pokemon and an ARMS rep, but not the ones that were predicted. What Turtle did get right was the stage for ARMS being Spring Stadium, though once again was something that everyone would predict was the case if an ARMS character joined Smash, because the stage is so iconic. Now, that's all of Turtle's leaks, but what exactly happened after he fooled absolutely no one with his Smash leak? I mean, just one look at his channel would show how talented he was at things like modding and Blender, more so than a lot of Smash leakers in the past. Well, after the video where he did a behind the scenes of his leak, he would go on to create other projects, some having to tie into Smash like his advanced Blender tutorial, where he explains how to take a raw model of a character and animate it, and another where he explains how to import a model from Blender, to other projects not having to do with Smash at all, like his Beat Saber custom songs, creation time lapses of original characters, and even some full-on animations that he made using programs like Blender and Maya. He then decided that this was his passion, and went on to become a 3D animator and generalist who works in the film industry doing pre-visualization, which is essentially when you use assets, whether that be digitally or hand-drawn, to visualize scenes in a movie before filming it. On August 30th, 2019, Turtle would create a Behance account, where you will be able to view his personal projects and reels involving such processes, though it seems that since the last time he updated it was the Hubris of a Machine project, something that he created years ago, this account seems to be replaced with his ArtStation account, in which all his projects will be present, including his most recent one posted on August 24th, 2022, Radiant Assemble, where he worked on the 3D modeling, set layout, material and lighting, look dev, camera animation, rigging, and editing. As of the recording of this video, he seems to be an RIT 3DDD alumni as of 2021, and is still having fun making 3D animations to this day, and has even gotten the opportunity to be hired as a pre-visualization artist for the award-winning studio, The Third Floor. And looking through his history and projects, I'm not surprised whatsoever. It's not every day where a Smash Bros leaker reveals themselves so that we're able to see what they're doing nowadays, but Turtle has definitely shown his skills in creating 3D environments and models. Also, call it a hunch, but I have a suspicion that he does not like AI. Don't know why, I just feel like there's something there. While the Springman Decidueye leak or the VirtualTurtle leaks were some of the most obvious fake leaks of all time, where really no one fell for it, between him remaking the entirety of Spring Stadium and even doing the character animation and moveset entirely in Blender, I think I can safely say that it turned out to be one of the most impressively made leaks, with Turtle, or should I say Noah, himself spinning it into an amazing 3D modeler and animator. And I hope to see more of his incredible work and success in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. And with all that being said, you can put your spatulas down now, but keep it sizzling, my Baconators.